Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Olarinde. Here's what's coming up in the half hour. Death toll rises to 1,400 after Afghanistan earthquake as rescue efforts continue. Sudan landslide in western Darfur wipes out an entire village, killing at least 1,000 people. Plus, the EU foreign policy chief urges more pressure on Russia, criticizing US President Donald Trump for his patience with Vladimir Putin. Welcome once again to the world today. The Taliban government says the death toll after the earthquake in Kunar province has risen to more than 1,411 people. UN Humanitarian Coordinator Indrika Ratwete warned that the number of casualties could still rise exponentially, even as rescue teams struggle to reach remote communities that have been cut off by mountains and damaged roads. The UK has pledged £1 million to support relief operations, while India has sent tents, food and other aid supplies. The European Union says it is sending 130 tons of emergency goods and €1 million in assistance. In the meantime, this region was struck again by a new 5.2 magnitude aftershock, even as rescuers continued to search for survivors from Sunday's 6.0 magnitude quake. More than 3,000 people are reported to have been wounded. Here in Africa, the Sudan Liberation Movement Army is appealing for help from the United Nations even after a landslide in the western Darfur region destroyed an entire village. According to a rebel group that controls the area, an estimated 1,000 people have died and they need assistance in recovering bodies buried by the landslide after heavy rains. News agencies in Sudan say the Sudan Liberation Movement Army issued a statement late on Monday reporting the disaster in the Mara Mountains. That's the area in Darfur. SLMA also stated that the landslide occurred on Sunday following days of heavy rainfall in the area, and the village of Tarasin was completely leveled to the ground, leaving only one survivor. The ruling Sovereign Council in Khartoum says it mourns the death of the innocent residents that have died in the Mara Mountains landslide, adding that all possible capabilities have been mobilized to support the area. The news of this disaster comes as Sudan's ongoing war, now in its third year, plunges the country further into one of the world's worst humanitarian crises, with famine already declared in parts of Darfur. We're in Indonesia now, where the United Nations Human Rights Office says it is closely following violent protests taking place across the country. UN spokesperson Ravina Shamdasani calls for dialogue to address public concerns and is urging authorities to allow the media to report freely. She says security forces, including the military, must respect international norms on the use of force, and investigations should be conducted into all alleged rights violations.
We're following closely the spate of violence in Indonesia in the context of nationwide demonstrations. We stress the importance of dialogue to address the public's concerns. It is also important that the media is permitted to report on events freely and independently. The authorities must uphold the rights to peaceful assembly and freedom of expression while maintaining order in line with international norms and standards in relation to the policing of public assemblies. All security forces, including the military when deployed in a law enforcement capacity, must comply with the basic principles on the use of force and firearms. We call for prompt, thorough, and transparent investigations into all alleged violations of international human rights law.
UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy is warning that the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is now spreading across the wider territory. Mr. Lammy told Parliament that conditions in Gaza are bleak and is accusing Israel of fueling a man-made famine. He criticizes both Israel and Hamas, condemning Hamas for starving hostages and blaming Israel for blocking aid. The Foreign Secretary also highlighted UK measures, including the restoration of funding to the UN Palestinian agency UNRWA, suspending arms exports that could be used in Gaza, and also imposing sanctions on violent settlers.
In Gaza, on the ground, it's unimaginably bleak. Horrifying images and accounts will be seared into the minds of colleagues across this House. They're almost impossible to put into words. But we can and must be precise with our language. Because on the 22nd of August, the UN-backed IPC mechanism confirmed what we are witnessing. Famine. Famine in Gaza City. Famine in its surrounding neighborhoods, now spreading across the wider territory. Famine which, unchecked, will spiral into widespread starvation. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is not a natural disaster. It's a man-made famine in the 21st century. And I'm outraged by the Israeli government's refusal to allow in sufficient aid. We need a massive humanitarian response to prevent more deaths. Crucial NGOs, humanitarians and health workers allowed to operate, and stockpiles of aid on Gaza's borders released. As a result, in the past 3 months, over 2,000 Gazans have been killed trying to feed their families. And Hamas themselves are exploiting the chaos and deliberately starving Israeli hostages for abhorrent political purposes. Madam Deputy Speaker, I know that these words of condemnation echoed across legislatures all over the world are not enough. But be in no doubt, we have acted as a country where we can. We restored funding to UNRWA. We suspended arms exports that could be used in Gaza. We signed a landmark agreement with the Palestinian Authority. We stood up for the independence of international courts. We've delivered 3 sanctions packages, 3 on violent settlers and far-right Israeli ministers for incitement. We've suspended trade negotiations with the Israeli government, and we are at the forefront of the international community's work to plan for a stable post-conflict peace.
The United Nations Working Group on Business and Human Rights, alongside other United Nations experts, are calling on international oil companies and their host governments to uphold human rights obligations in Nigeria. The intervention comes amid long-standing concerns over decades of oil spills in the Niger Delta, which have left communities with devastating environmental and economic damage. Critics say that while these firms have recently sold off many of their assets to domestic buyers, they have failed to clean up past pollution or even ensure future accountability. Observers believe this marks the first major UN step pressing both companies and states to take responsibility, a move that could also strengthen ongoing legal challenges and shape future asset sales in Nigeria's oil industry. Well, joining us now for more discussions on this is Dr. Marcus Orellana, the UN Special Rapporteur on Toxics and Human Rights. He's also one of the 7 different experts to have worked in this. Thank you, Dr. Orellana, for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, I want to begin by asking your perspective, on this intervention. Like I mentioned earlier, you're one of the 7 different international experts to have worked in this.
Well, according to the information that special procedures of the United Nations Human Rights Council we have received, certain Western oil companies in Nigeria are responsible for widespread environmental damage in the Niger Delta. Disclosed data just from the years of 2011 to 2017 reveals 17.5 million liters of oil spilled to the environment. And this figure is likely to be higher given the company's failure to report hundreds of spills. And so the devastated sites are yet to be remedied. And this has resulted in human rights abuses, especially for communities in vulnerable situations. People have suffered violations of the right to life, the right to health, and the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. And victims of pollution have a right to effective remedies, including cleanup.
Well, many of these international oil companies have now sold their assets and, exited the Niger Delta that we're talking about. What obligations do they still carry to the communities that have suffered decades of pollution?
Well, Western oil companies in Nigeria not only have profited extensively from oil exploitation in the Niger Delta, they have also conducted operations without adequate regard to the social and environmental impacts. And accordingly, they are responsible for remedying the impacts caused by their activities. This includes environmental restoration and adequate compensation to the people who have suffered from the contamination.
And some argue, that domestic buyers lack the resources to clean up or manage these liabilities. From a human rights perspective, what should governments be doing to now ensure accountability?
Well, the divestment of onshore assets by the Western oil companies appears to follow a script or tactic that places huge liabilities on actors, on companies that lack the financial capacity to shoulder them. According to the information we have received, the domestic buyers of these assets also appear to lack the technical ability for environmental remediation and cleanup. Governments have the obligation under international human rights law to ensure that victims of human rights violations, victims of human rights abuses have access to an effective remedy. Allowing divestment without accountability breaches this obligation.
And finally, Dr. Orellana, there are legal cases already in court, but beyond this, how do you see this UN intervention influencing future oil industry practices, especially in relation to asset sales and environmental justice?
Well, the special procedures of the United Nations Human Rights Council are monitoring and reporting mandates. We thus report to the Council on situations, on cases, on practices that can lead to human rights abuses and violations. States are therefore expected to take action to uphold their human rights obligations. This includes national courts in member states of the United Nations. In this instance, Nigeria is under the obligation to ensure cleanup of the damaged environment and to ensure that victims receive reparations. And at the same time, the home states of the oil companies have a duty to control the activities of corporations of their nationality so that they remedy the human rights abuses they have caused in the Niger Delta.
All right, then. Thank you so much, Dr. Marcus Orellana, UN Special Rapporteur on Toxics and Human Rights. Thank you for speaking to us on the program.
Thank you very much.
Well, let's take a break now on the world today. Still to come. Kazakhstan celebrates its Independence Day with horse races and hunting. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the world today. The European Union's High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Kaja Kallas, is criticizing U.S. President Donald Trump for showing what she calls extra patience with Russia's President Vladimir Putin. She was speaking in Bratislava. She says President Trump is not a very patient man, but seems to be very patient with President Putin. Mrs. Kallas also argued that Moscow is demanding territories it has not even conquered, warning that any peace deal must be approved by both Ukrainians and Europeans for the peace deal to be credible.
This is the classical Russian negotiation tactic. So, like pushing this, presenting demands, threats, using force for something that has never been yours. And by the way, in these negotiations, they are also demanding territories that they haven't even conquered militarily. So, like, we are making a compromise as we are settling for those territories that we have militarily conquered. So why is it a trap? It is because everybody's starting to talk about what Ukraine should give up. And saying, of course, it's up to Zelensky to decide what territories they are willing to give up. But then, you know, it really misses the point that Russia hasn't made any concessions, and they are the aggressor here, so they haven't made any concessions while everybody's talking about what Ukraine should give away, and that's the trap.
Meanwhile, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has said sanctions against Russia are working, claiming Moscow's war economy is reaching its limits. Speaking in Romania, she said sanctions removal is now Russia's top demand in any talks. She also praised Romania as a key NATO ally on the Black Sea and a reliable supporter of Ukraine and Moldova. This follows her announcement that the EU is preparing a 19th sanctions package while also developing plans to use frozen Russian assets to fund Ukraine.
You help keep Europe safe in the air and waters of the Black Sea. And more than ever, Romania is a key asset for European security and a key partner of NATO's eastern flank. Dear Nicușor, it is a pleasure to be in Romania for the first time since your inauguration. Over the past month, Romania has shown impressive resilience of its democracy and its institutions. You have successfully countered attempts of disinformation and manipulation. You are very strong, ironclad and reliable supporters of Ukraine and Moldova. Intimidations you resist, intimidations that are usually part of Moscow's playbook, but this only makes our resilience stronger. You have worked hard to bring the deficit under control. You have advanced reforms and you are modernizing your economy. And we welcome these efforts. Romania has everything it needs to set its economy on the right trajectory. We had even the case that the Russian Minister of Economic Development said publicly that Russia is on the brink of recession. And Russia's overheated war economy is definitely coming to its limits. There's even one more interesting point that speaks for itself. Because when we speak directly with partners that speak with Russia, they say that the main worry of the Russians is to get rid of the sanctions. So whatever...
Well, China is preparing for its 80th Victory Day celebrations, and Beijing is tightening security even as President Xi Jinping prepares for a major showcase of power in the Tiananmen Square. 8 large Chinese flags flank the portrait of Mao Zedong above the gate of the Heavenly Peace. A seating has been reserved for 26 foreign heads of state, including Russia's Vladimir Putin and North Korea's Kim Jong-un. Some African leaders also have already arrived in Beijing for the ceremony. 2 giant floral arrangements commemorate the end of World War II with space for around 50,000 invitees. This event is being seen as a diplomatic win for President Xi Jinping, who will host his allies in a grand display of military might. And finally, Kazakhstan has marked its Independence Day with horse races and traditional hunting games in the Chopon-Ata region. Visitors who attended witnessed several performances, including Salburun. It's a unique hunting game featuring birds and dogs. Some tourists say the performances made them embrace and enjoy the Kyrgyz culture. The competitions began August 26th to the 31st at the Cholpon Ata Hippodrome.
It's my third time in Kyrgyzstan. I really love the country. It's especially the nature is amazing, and it's this time we had the chance to go and see Kokboru, which is an amazing and incredibly challenging game. So super happy to see it and see it part of Kyrgyz culture.
And that's it on the world today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Olarinde.